what I hope is that there's a connection between print and person, because a lot of times folks read and read and read and don't imagine that there's a human being behind the language. And what we do in these kinds of sessions is remind us that books are written by people, and that's what we're trying to do. So that connection is really important. I think it's often inspiring, at least it was for me as a student.
So that's the sort of long way of introducing this particular essay, which is about learning the subjunctive mood. If any of you are not, well, if you're native English speakers, for example, and you try to learn a language like Spanish, like French, that uses the subjunctive mood, it's the thing that drives you most crazy. Because in English, we don't have the framework for a subjunctive mood, and you need to understand that framework in order to use the verbs properly. So I think that the essay will explain for you what the subjunctive mood is if you happen not to know. And then afterwards we can talk about it if you'd like. So this essay is titled In the Subjunctive Mood. Think of it this way. Learning to use the subjunctive mood is like learning to drive a stick shift. It's like falling in love with a car that isn't new or sporty, but has a tilt steering wheel and a price you can afford. It's like being so in love with the possibilities, with the places you might go and the experiences you might have, that you pick up your new used car without quite knowing how to drive it, sputtering and stalling and rolling backward at every light. Then you drive the car each day for months until the stalling stops and you figure out how to downshift, until you can hear the engine's registers and move through them with grace. And later, after you've gained control over the driving and lost control over so much else, you sell the car and most of your possessions and move yourself to Spain, to a place where language and circumstance will help you understand the subjunctive. Remember that the subjunctive is a mood, not a tense. Verb tenses tell when something happens. Moods tell how true. It's easy to skim over moods in a new language or to translate the words and think you've understood, which is why your first months in Spain will lack nuance. But eventually, after enough conversations have passed, enough hours of talking with your students at the University of Oviedo and your housemate Lola and the friends you make when you wander the streets looking like a foreigner, you'll discover that you need the subjunctive in order to finish a question or an answer or a thought you couldn't have had without it. In language, as in life, moods are complicated, but at least in language, there are only two. The indicative mood is for knowledge, facts, absolutes, for describing what's real or definite. You'd use the indicative to say, for example, I was in love, or the man I loved tried to kill himself, or I moved to Spain because the man I loved, the man who tried to kill himself, was driving me insane. The indicative helps you tell what happened, or is happening, or will happen in the future when you believe you know for sure what the future will bring. The subjunctive mood, on the other hand, is uncertain. It helps you tell what could have been, or might be, or what you want, but may not get. You'd use the subjunctive to say, I thought he'd improve without me, or I left so that he'd begin to take care of himself. Or later, after your perspective has been altered by time and distance and a couple of cervezas in a brightly lit bar, you might say, I deserted him, indicative. I left him alone with his crazy self for a year, indicative, because I hoped, after which begins the subjunctive, that being apart might allow us to come together again. That's the beauty and also the danger of English, that the definite and the might be often look so much alike. And it's the reason why, during a period in your life when everything feels hypothetical, Spain will be a very seductive place to live.